Mark Carney just destroyed the opposition leader Pierre Poilievre within seconds after his desperate attempt to sabotage Carney's session and make a scandal out of it.
Since the Prime Minister was elected promising, quote, to negotiate a win with the U.S., American tariffs on autos, aluminum, and steel have doubled, and on Canadian lumber, they've tripled. Not a single American tariff has been reduced since he promised he would reduce them. And now he says, who cares? Yep. Mr. Speaker, I care about the 3,000 auto workers that I met on the picket line in Brampton who are out of a job. I care about the 8 mills that have closed because the Prime Minister failed to deliver a deal. The workers on those lines, they care. Canadians care. Why doesn't the Prime Minister care?
As always, Poilievre opened with a line that he's repeated over and over in the past, as if the repetition itself could make the accusation stick. For a moment, it looked like Poilievre had the momentum. He was loud, energized, and talking as if he had caught Carney in some unforgivable moment. But then Carney stood up and flipped the mood in seconds.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since I became Prime Minister, Canada has secured the lowest tariffs of any country in the world. On 85% of our goods, the tariffs are zero. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
If you know anything about Carney, you know he's not your typical politician. He's best known as a global economist, the former governor of the Bank of Canada and later governor of the Bank of England, who guided those institutions through turbulent economic times. And from the moment he assumed control of Canadian soil, that's precisely what he's achieved. Even with all the excitement around Canada's economic direction after Carney's oath-taking, no one pretended the path forward would be free of trade-offs. The auto sector and steel industry, 2 pillars of Canadian manufacturing identity, have been under real pressure in recent years. And those pressures didn't magically disappear the moment Carney stepped into office.
There are sectors, the auto sector, the steel sector, the lumber sector, the aluminum sector, that are under pressure. We care. We're acting in those sectors. There will be announcements this week to further support.
Canada's auto industry has been grappling with structural challenges long before this political moment. Production in Canada has been declining for more than a decade, as automakers shifted more assembly to the US and Mexico, a trend documented by Statistics Canada and industry analysts. In fact, Canadian vehicle production fell sharply between 2000 and the mid-2010s due to global competition, supply chain changes, and the rise of non-North American manufacturing powerhouses, a trend described in detail by the Government of Canada's Automotive Industry Profile. The transition to electric vehicles has also required massive new investments. Traditional assembly plants, especially those in Ontario, had to retool or risk being left behind. The Wilson Center's analysis of North American EV supply chains highlighted that Canada needed to accelerate its battery, mineral, and EV manufacturing capacity to remain competitive.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Before the election, he promised elbows up. After, it was who cares? Before the election, he said the tariffs were an existential crisis. Now he says they're not a burning issue. Before the election, he promised to negotiate a win. After, he backed down to American tariffs, and those tariffs have now doubled on Canadian aluminum, autos, and steel, and tripled on Canadian lumber. Before the election, he promised the fastest growing economy in the G7. After, he delivered the fastest shrinking economy. Why is the Prime Minister before the election so much different than the one after?
The 2018 U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs, which Canada responded to with its own countermeasures, further disrupted the sector and still linger as an example of how vulnerable the industry is to external shocks. And Carney knew that walking into the office. Poilievre may think he's standing tall, tapping the throbbing nerve of Carney's cabinet. But the reality is, these problems have stemmed from a time far before Carney assumed control.
Mr. Speaker, on the night of the election, when I had the great honor from my constituents of being elected as a deputy of this House, unlike some others in the chamber today.
That's right, folks. Here's the part that turned heads across the country. Despite these sectoral dips, the broader Canadian economy began to show real promise in the weeks following Carney's swearing in. This wasn't magic. It was momentum backed by structural strengths that economists have repeatedly pointed out.
I made a promise to Canadians. When I make a mistake, I'll admit it. That was a poor choice of words about a serious issue. And the serious issue is what progress are we making structurally? Look, best deal in the world, strongest budget in the world, and the most new trade deals in the world.
Canada's economy has always been quietly strong. The OECD often highlights Canada's solid banking system, steady job market, and growing population as major strengths. Canada's financial system is considered one of the safest in the world, a point the World Economic Forum regularly notes. Similarly, under Carney's leadership, confidence surged. International investors began paying attention again, especially as Canada's EV mineral resources, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and lithium, gained global strategic value. Experts are even stating that Canada holds some of the world's most significant deposits of critical minerals essential for EV batteries and clean technology, which has become a major growth engine for the future.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister did make a mistake. He's made many mistakes. In fact, it's been nothing but mistakes when it's come to trade. Look at it. This Prime Minister promised that he would negotiate a win on softwood lumber. Now he says, who cares? Well, Conservatives care. Within 80 days of the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, taking office, he managed to eliminate American tariffs on softwood lumber and get refunds of them. This Prime Minister has now had 8 months, and those tariffs have now more than tripled. Prime Minister asks, who cares? I can tell you, on behalf of all the MPs on this side, we care about the jobs that are being lost in Lumbertown. Why doesn't he?
Despite the broader signs of economic momentum under Carney's leadership, Pierre Poilievre has continued to cling to the same old talking points and excuses, even as Canadians witness tangible progress. Let's be real, Poilievre's style clearly shows how ignorant he is of clear, sound policy from the opposition. When he's held positions of influence in the past, he's struggled to translate rhetorical promises into legislative change or lasting outcomes.
Mr. Speaker, this government cares about creating jobs in this country. That's why we proposed a budget before this House that catalyzes $1 trillion of investment over 5 years. The member opposite and his colleagues, those who could make it into the room, voted against that budget, voted against Canadian workers, voted against Canada's future. We believe in this country, Mr. Speaker, and we are building it.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Chinese, American, Indian, and other tariffs have only gone up since the Prime Minister began his 28-trip journey around the world. He hasn't had a single solitary win. In fact, the only wins he's had are for Brookfield. Just days after he met with the President, Trump signed on to $80 billion of nuclear purchases from Brookfield. And then he gave $500 million of our tax money to the European Space Agency located on Brookfield's campus. Why is it that whenever he spends his time and our money, Canadians end up poor and he and Brookfield end up richer?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, not for the first time, the Leader of the Opposition needs to check his numbers. The government of Indonesia is reducing tariffs on 95% of Canadian goods. Canada has the best deal with the United States. 85% of our goods are tariff-free. The United Arab Emirates is just confirmed that they want to invest $70 billion in this country. They believe in Canada's future. Why don't the members up?
Carney emerged not only unscathed, but elevated. His calm under pressure, his ability to center Canadians in the discussion, and his refusal to be dragged into petty squabbles left a strong impression on both sides of the court. And his response was a clear message, not to his opposition, but his subjects and foreign powers, that Canada's leader isn't the one to easily give in to any pressure.